Hello and welcome to the Wine and Wisdom Show. Thank you for being here tonight. If it is your first time, I very much appreciate you trusting in the fact that you're giving up your time. I hope you've got a little splash in a glass and you're nice and comfy on the couch. And if you are returning, thank you again for coming back. I love it when I see the familiar faces coming down in the comments section. So please make yourself known and let me know that you're here. I wanted to tell you a little bit about this show very, very quickly. Obviously, it's called Wine and Wisdom, but it's not just about having a glass of wine together and sharing of wisdom. It's actually a show about connection. And I think what we have all learned over the last few months is, as humans, we crave connecting with other humans who bring a smile to our faces, some warmth to our hearts, and some wisdom to our brains. And that is why I want to be here with you tonight. So not only to connect with you and to share a virtual wine together, but also to connect you with the incredible, talented and unique people that I have been lucky enough to have in my life somehow, some way. And I think, the guests that I have on this show are what I would deem the most resilient and courageous self-leaders who are making such a difference across our globe. And let me tell you, tonight is no exception. Oh my gosh, have I got a guest for you. His name is Justin Jones. I'm actually just going to bring him up rather than just talk about him with him not being here. Let me bring him up so you can see his smiley face. There he is. Hello, Justin.
G'day, Heidi. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you for being here tonight.
No, my pleasure. This is so super cool. It's nice to catch up for a virtual wine. We haven't seen each other in a while.
We haven't seen each other for a while. What have you got in your glass?
I have a glass of Tassie Pinot. And yourself?
Yeah, I have a glass of Pepper Jack Shiraz.
Ooh, excellent.
Well,
Fantastic.
actually, one of my other guests told me that I shouldn't say the name out loud unless they start sponsoring me. So I take that back. It's just a really nice Shiraz.
Well, maybe they just have to sponsor you now. We'll reach out to them tomorrow.
We will. So everybody, this is Justin Jones. He is affectionately known as Jonesy, but I have this funny thing about calling people by their surnames, and I know that probably the entire universe does it, but I've got to call you Justin. I hope you don't mind.
That's completely fine.
Thank you. All right. Now, Justin, he has so much to share with us tonight, but we're going to start. You would have known by reading my blurbs about him that he has 2 Guinness Book World Record. How do you say it? Guinness World Records. I feel like saying Guinness World Records. And let me tell you, they are not because he has eaten the most Mars bars on the planet in 24 hours. It is not that kind of world record. He has some incredible world records. And he's going to share some of the insights from that tonight. Hello to we've got Jean. Hello, Jean. Thank you for being here. Was it Philippe? Hello, Philippe. Lovely for you to be here tonight. If you are live right now, we cannot see if you are unless you make a comment. So please, if you could let us know what is in your glass at least, or where you are tuning in from, that would be terrific. So, Justin.
Yes, Heidi.
Can you share with us all who you are, what you do, and all the wonderful positivity you are sprinkling across our globe?
I'm a pretty ordinary average bloke, Heidi, so you've really blown a lot of smoke up me.
I don't think so.
Look, no, I actually do firmly believe that I'm an average guy, but I've done a couple of things in this little short lifespan I've had so far. And the reason I say I'm ordinary is that, I'm not the fittest guy out there, not the smartest, not the best looking, but I've gone out there and chased some pretty big expeditions and adventures. And I wasn't always this way. I started out as a very awkward child, and it was the outdoors that helped me sort of unlock myself and become the person I am today. Some of the trips that I have done over the past 18, 19 years have been paddle from Australia to New Zealand in a kayak, unsupported, unassisted. That was 62 days. And we paddled 3,318 kilometers. Weren't expecting it to be that long. It's only 2,200 kilometers in a straight line, so there was an extra 50% there. 10-meter wave sharks, that whole palaver. The other big expedition where you're referring to, another world record, was actually skiing from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole and back completely unsupported. I should mention from the geographical South Pole, so where the land ice meets the sea ice, to the South Pole and back unsupported and unassisted. And that was 89 days, first time that had been done, 89 days, 2,285 kilometers. And there was a brutal expedition. I lost 30 kilos worth of weight on that trip.
Oh,
but yeah, it's a good weight loss strategy. So Jenny Craig, move over. But I think that one of the hardest trips I've done was probably my most recent one. I was out in the Outback walking for 102 days, 1,800 kilometers with my wife and our 1-year-old daughter when she was 15 months old. That was brutal. Yeah. I think because of the intensity of the stakeholder group that you have with them, with you. So that's some of the things that I've been up to amongst other little trips. And I have fallen into a career of being a public speaker, a motivational speaker. And I didn't know that whole pathway existed. There was just people asking after the Tasman trip to speak at a company this or company that. And so started doing it and realized that it's a powerful medium to actually be able to share positive stories, lessons learned from adventure. And then also the other side is to make documentaries, which is what I do.
Yeah, and I'd like for everyone to know that when I first met Justin, I saw him speak at an event where there is a range of speakers there with a whole heap of event leaders in the room, looking for great speakers to book. And let me tell you, Justin's, like, truly, I've not told you this, but your segment was off the chart. Like, it was so remarkably up here. And there were great speakers there, but you are a master storyteller. You are very, very clever and intuitive with reading a crowd. And of course, you've got these incredible stories. There's no doubt about that. But I tell you what, and this is why I wanted to get you on tonight, it's those incredible insights and learnings that you have been able to share with people from those expeditions, from those adventures, through the adversities that you've gone through. And what struck me that day watching you, which has brought us tonight together, is that, adversities come in all shapes and sizes, right? And you have certainly prepared for some of those adversities. You've known that you're going into them because you don't get to make a world record by doing something easy. That they are challenging experiences. So I thought it'd be really interesting for you to talk to us about the similarities between some of the adversities that you have gone into, where you have prepared, but of course lots of shits happen, right, during those expeditions that you would never have known were going to happen, and how that can relate to all of us who are all going through such major adversities right now. We have no idea what's ahead. It's so uncertain. What can we draw from all that?
Look, I've always said that adventure all it is just an activity with an unknown outcome. That's all an adventure is. And an adventure is a very relative term, so no one can tell you what your adventure is going to be. For some people, it might be, skiing across Antarctica or paddling a kayak from Australia and New Zealand. Other people, that's not their cup of tea. It might be actually starting a business in the dramatic arts. It might be on the sporting field. You can have adventures anywhere, but it's that uncertainty element. There's the unknown outcome, and that's a key part of it. And I think right now, what we're finding is the entire world is on an adventure. It's on an expedition. Now, don't get me wrong. It's really hard expedition for some people. I love the analogy of this COVID pandemic being a storm, and we're all out in the ocean navigating this storm, but we all have different boats. Everyone does. Different experiences, different levels of experience, different vessels, different, seaworthiness of each vessel. So some people are doing it really tough. Other people are doing it really quite easy in reality. And I think the number one thing is that we just have to be kind to each other, because we're all going through the same thing. We're just not managing it the same way. So expeditions, I think, are a perfect perfect to draw a line from them to what we're doing right now, what we're going through, because there's a lot of little tidbits and adventure lessons that you can pull from adventure that I think you can apply to everyday life, around preparation, around planning, around risk mitigation, around mindset, and how you sort of flip negative scenarios and lean in to the discomfort. Because in reality, the number one lesson I've learned through all my expeditions is you only grow when you're uncomfortable. You can't grow when you're comfortable. So this is a period of growth for us. Growth we might not want to go through, but we are going to go through it.
Yeah. So can you tell us, Justin, at a time when you had done, it's like I think you had, over a year's planning to cross the ditch?
Oh, actually,
how many years planning was there?
Was
there more?
3.5.
Oh, I'm sorry. 3.5 years.
No. That's completely fine. Yeah, 3.5 years for a 2-month crossing. It's 90% in the preparation stage and only 10% in the execution. So it's very weighted towards the preparation. You plan to succeed or plan to fail. It's up to you. But the thing is, there's always going to be curveballs. So you've just got to prepare as much as you can. Ask all the dark, dirty questions before you head out on the trip, on your expedition, start that business, whatever it is. And get pretty inventive with the way you think about these things. So some of the things we talked about with the Tasman was, if someone broke a leg, obviously, someone got injured, what would you do? But then we got darker. If someone's family member actually had a severe illness or died actually out there, would you want to hear about it? Because it changed your mindset. Or would you want to hear about, a bomb going off in Beirut? Or would you want to hear about a 9/11 kind of event? So these are the things that you've got to think about prior to going on a trip, prior to starting a business. And they're not pretty, they're not comfortable, but you come up with an actions on, which is your how-to, what you're going to do in each scenario. So that when you're out there, you know what the protocol is. And if you start deviating away from that protocol, there's got to be a really, really good reason for you drifting away from that. Black Swan events happen. COVID pandemics, all that. Although I think the COVID pandemic was on the cards, I think there were a lot of warning signs, but myself included, I didn't want to sort of think about it or believe it. But yeah, if you've got everything else taken care of, then you can focus your attention on that Black Swan event, so that the other stuff that you would normally be fluffing about when it comes up, you're not thinking about. You're focusing on what you need to do.
Because you can just go straight into, we know that this could happen. This is what we have already decided to respond.
Exactly.
With that. So Shani, thank you, Shani. Hello, Shani, gorgeous girl from Sydney, who was on last time, a gold medal winner, by
Hi,
the way.
Shani.
She's asking about the preparation. So 3.5 years for crossing the ditch. Well, how long for the Antarctic?
The Antarctic trip was probably about 2.5 years of preparation and planning. And something I should mention is that I'm not, prior to the Tasman trip, I had never paddled, or prior to committing to the Tasman journey, I'd never paddled a kayak offshore. Prior to Antarctica, coming up with that plan, I hadn't skied yet. So I'm a firm believer in you should never let the lack of skill stop you from having a dream. So that's part of the process. So there was a pretty long period of time where we had to learn how to ski for Antarctica. But so 2.5 years for that. The quickest trip to plan was actually the Outback Expedition, and that's because we were on a time limit, because we wanted to leave before our daughter Morgan was a certain age, because she'd be easy to control when she was smaller, rather than if she was 2 or 3 years old running around.
But I mean, we had this pre-chat, and you were talking about that beautiful picture behind you was painted by one of the Aboriginal elders that you needed to get permission from to go walk through that part. So that again is something out of your control, because you don't know how long that's going to take. If you've got your timeline in mind, like seriously, you're just like, well, I have no control over that.
You're actually touching on a pain point, because leading up to that trip, so we tried to do the right thing and engage, the Central Land Council and the right councils prior to going out there, and we did that X amount of months in advance, and we found out, we weren't getting any feedback from them about how our permit process was going, and then we ended up going, we're just going to have to fly down there and find out what's going on in person, and to find out that our proposal had actually been sitting on someone's desk for 3 months, not being worked on, was quite frustrating. And so it was amazing that they activated, and Sandy Willie, the artist of that picture, who's the TA, the traditional owner, the elder of that sort of area, he was the one that signed off, and he painted that picture that's been sitting over us for the past
How beautiful.
8-9 years.
So, Justin, tell us about a time that you're on one of your expeditions where you'd done all your planning, but a black swan actually occurred. And it was, oh my gosh, we had no comprehension that this uncertainty, this challenge, this adversity could ever have happened. I mean, what was it? What did you do? What was the mindset for you to go into to be able to navigate through it and still get out the other end?
I'm trying to think about because a lot of things have actually happened on my expeditions that, to some degree or form, I've always, we've been semi-prepared for. So, on the Tasman journey, desalinators breaking down, equipment breaking down, but you have replacements, you have spares. What I think we weren't prepared for was, I'll actually tell two stories. One was something that we had prepared for, but we weren't thinking. So there was an element of taking our eye off the ball and the consequences of what actually happened. So I'll tell that story first. Yeah. That was down in Antarctica. And so in Antarctica, on the second day of the journey, we're climbing up a fairly steep hill. Our sleds behind us weighed about 160 kilos each. So imagine your household refrigerator at home, stack that full of beer and wine, push that on its back and start dragging that around the living room. Heavy sleds. And in order to get more traction going up this hill, we took off our skis. So we were now walking up. Now, we'd been crossing through a crevasse field at that point. Now, a crevasse is a crack in the ice, and how you cross a crevasse is you find snow bridges that form over the top of them. Now, we'd been crossing these crevasses on our skis, and they'd held. And so we approached James approached one, Cass, my mate, and he went straight into it. And he went down and got about waist deep before the weight of the sled actually held him in place. Now, we knew that crevasses were an issue, but what we did was we actually changed some variables in our system that meant that, we took our skis off, and the skis were distributing our weight over a large surface area. And by doing, basically walking up, we post-holed through that snow bridge, almost fell down to his death. So that taught me a very valuable lesson that if you ever change a variable in a business, in an expedition, you've got to think about the flow-on effects. You have to think about how that flows on. So a lot of people right now are reacting to what's happening with COVID. And I think, to react and to move, afterthought is fantastic, because to stay static, it's very hard to start a ship when it's moving, when it's going from scratch, where you can course correct. Yeah. But you have to think about what other flow-on effects in your business, in your personal life will happen if you do X, Y, Z, whatever action it is. So it's nice to think about everything like that, a closed system. I'm changing this variable. What will happen over on this side of the field by changing that variable? Now, an incident that actually happened on the Outback Expedition that we weren't expecting, and I wouldn't say it was necessarily a Black Swan event, but it was a piece of equipment failure that I just had thought was bomb-proof. And so that was on day 8 of that expedition, snapping an axle. It was a big 20 mil thick axle, stainless steel. And I just didn't expect that to break. And in hindsight, I realized I made a couple of stuff-ups on the lead up to the journey by having the cart assembled on top of the car as we're driving down the final stretch of road, which had all these corrugations in it. And so it basically meant that there was these micro vibrations happening, and it ended up putting a stress fracture in the axle. So that was an interesting one, looking down. We're stuck in the middle of nowhere with a broken cart and trying to work out how we self-rescue ourselves from those situations. I think the number one thing you can do when things go wrong is you've got to immediately assess the situation around you and ask, Maslow's hierarchy of needs mainly being, are you going to die in this situation? And if you are, remove yourself from the danger. But if you're not, take a pause, take a moment, have a cup of tea and think. And just think about what your possible actions are, and then make a decision off that and then go for it. And we ended up dumping the carts in a bush and trying to find a place to hitchhike out of, and then make our way to civilization so we could make up new axles and then recontinue the journey. So it was an interesting one.
If you're listening right now live, or if you come on later, which we know happens a lot with Facebook Lives, please, if you have a question for Justin, put them in the comments. We will come back to them afterwards and answer anything that we don't get to tonight. So please, he's a world record holder. I mean, come on, what questions would you have? And you brushed over something really quickly then, Justin.
Yeah.
You talked about that, on the crossing the ditch, you're paddling to New Zealand, and, the water what's it called?
The water desalinator.
The water desalinator broke, because I watched the DVD last night.
Oh.
And, that's, for you just saying that, I know now what that actually meant. It meant 2.5 hours extra every day of physical exercise of you guys pumping to get fresh water so you could actually live, on top of how many dozens, hundreds of kilometers you're already paddling. So when you talk about, you brushed over it like, oh yeah, this little thing happened. I mean, that's a big thing that you can't plan for. Or did you plan? Was that one of your questions you had?
No,
what just happened?
We planned for that. We did plan for that. I mean, so with what we worked out with, and I might just tell something. I'm a bit of a nerd, so just excuse me for a second. I want to talk about statistics. So this is going to be mind-blowingly amazing. Talking about stats with a glass of wine.
That's why I've picked up my glass.
Oh, okay, excellent, fantastic. Fills me with confidence. Now, if you were to look at the Tasman journey, for example, and you were just to think about, all the possible things that could go wrong, but let's just look at the items that if they went wrong, the incidents or pieces of equipment, or if something happened, those items occurred, then the trip would be over.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, and let's assume for sake of ease, that there's only 10 things that could possibly break or could go wrong, and that would cause an end to the trip. Now, what would you say is an acceptable level of risk there? Like, a chance of, would you say a 10% chance of those things happening is an acceptable level of risk, or a 5% chance of happening is an acceptable level of risk? I mean,
a life-threatening situation. My God.
So it's not like we're playing Russian roulette like 1 in 6, but most people say, look, I'd accept 5% chance. That's a decent roll of dice. 19 out of 20 times you're going to be okay. Now, if you look at those 10 things and you look at them in series, the chance of actually one of those things happening is it's up to close to 50% chance of those things happening. Now, if you add a level of redundancy behind every single 10 of those incidents or items that could break down, then your risk drops down to about 3%. And then if you add another level of safety behind that, it drops down to like 0.5%. So knowing that, okay, there's a pain point. Desalinator, we need that to survive. If it breaks, we need an alternate solution. So we had 2 levels of redundancy there. So when that broke down, we could go to the manual pump. If the manual pump broke down, we could go back to the electrical pump, take the motor off that, and turn it into a manual pump as well. Yeah.
Which during these times of adversity, that was in a time of adversity, because if you don't have water, of course, it's a big issue. But right now, and our hearts go out to all of our neighbours in Victoria who are, oh my gosh, I can't even believe your stats for the last 24 hours. And I hope you're all safe as much as you can be. But things do go wrong. And we've seen, Australia was like being looked at as this amazing country that had kept control of coronavirus, but now things are changing quite quickly and people are having to adapt. We thought we were adapting and being creative back there in March and April, but those in Victoria are now having to adapt and be creative very, very quickly again, because what they had pivoted to or adapted or reinvented with their businesses has now been taken away nearly, and they've got to do it all again. I mean, do you have any insight about that, the adaptation process and that mindset process? I mean, I know you talk about your adventure thinking process, and I'd imagine that whole model would be very helpful to people right now.
Yeah, look, I do feel for the businesses out there in Victoria that have pivoted their businesses and done different things, and then to have a second wave come along and scupper that. Adversity it shouldn't be looked as a negative. A lot of people look at adversity, and I think reframing is one of the most important and powerful things in just changing the narrative of what actually is bad. I'll use an example for one expedition of something that, being stuck in that cabin of that kayak. It's basically the size of a coffin and a half stacked on top of each other. And I suffer from horrible, horrible, horrible claustrophobia, like shocking claustrophobia. That wasn't really talked about too much in the documentary, but the cabin is when I'm lying down, because I was down the tight end because James actually gets chronically seasick, so he gets the bigger area so he can vomit out the front door. But the cabin roof is maybe about 10, 15 centimeters above my head. And it was an incredibly hostile, horrible place to be in. But what I had to do to get through that situation was to look at the facts and rationalize myself. I also had a mantra that I used to use every night, and that used to help calm me down, which was, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. This is the situation we're in. Don't try and trick yourself you're in a good situation, because your mind and your body knows that inherently it's not, and it will fight and reject and act out against you. So accept the situation, but then look at it from a rational perspective. What is actually going on? Are you in risk? Are you in danger? The cabin is an incredibly horrible, claustrophobic place to be in, but the alternative is so much worse. To be out there when a 10-meter wave is breaking down on the kayak is so much worse. You will not survive in that environment. And so realizing that is a safe place. Now, in Victoria, it is terrible what they're going through, but compared to other places in the world, it's not as bad. We're being locked down, and, we've been told to sit back, stay inside, stick to curfew, go out there, practice social distancing, stay within a 5-kilometer radius of your home, all those things. It's incredibly confining, but it's not going to kill you. And so I think we should always kind of like lean into discomfort and use that as a tool to actually look at yourself as a human being and realize, why are you uncomfortable with the situation? What can I do differently? What's important to me? When you get everything, all the fluff stripped away, you actually realize what makes you tick as a human being. And then when you come out the other side, you can refocus on the things that you really should be focusing and not on that noise that you've surrounded yourself with. So I think it's a period of change and a period of, it's a crucible. We're burning off the excess from our lives that when we come out of it, we'll be purer people for it. It's the change that I think we needed to go through, unfortunately, because the world has become too obsessed with growth, too greedy, basically. Too there's too much consumption going on. And I think this is a nice little check and balance, and we'll come back for it better.
No, well said. Justin, there's 2 world records. There must be this kind of feeling in the tummy that number 3 is a good number. There's a hat trick to be made. So what's on the charts? What are you thinking about?
Look, I'm thinking about a lot of things. So the hard thing is, and this is what makes it hard to plan, is with what's going on with coronavirus, like most of the ideas I've had are actually to go travel somewhere and do other trips and journeys. I have plans to, one day I want to row a boat across the Pacific. I want to sail around the world with my family. We want to do a big cycle trip down in New Zealand because we've now got 2 kids, one that's sort of 9 months old now. So there's a lot of things, but I'm not committing to anything. We do have a young family, and it's very hard balancing adventure with family. And so that's part of the reason why we went on that last trip as a family. Now, you've just put up a question from Magdalene, and that's a super question she's just said. Basically, that's really easy for me to say about sort of leaning into the sort of whole discomfort, but what tools do you use to block out the noise? One of the biggest things that I've used on my expeditions is actually to reframe the situation. So reframe and actually compare. The power of comparison, I think, is quite a powerful tool. So down in Antarctica, towards the back end of the trip, I'd lost 30 kilos worth of weight, was bleeding every time I went to the bathroom, and was in incredible amounts of pain. I've never been that hungry in my life. And I would get into the tent and I'd break down and cry. I'd just feel like a broken human being, and I didn't know how I could continue. And something that I drew a lot of strength from, obviously there was the other bloke out there that I tried to show up for them. There was that teamwork angle, but something that really helped me was these 2 messages that were actually written on the inside of the tent. And these were these two messages from girls that were going through their chemo battles, actually at the Sydney Children's Hospital. And I look at these notes and they were talking about how inspiring they were finding our trip. And I'd feel this, almost a bit of a shame kind of creep in. I had chosen to put myself out there in that situation, and I was crying and bitching and whinging about it when these two girls were going through their battle with so much more grace and decorum that I could muster. What gave me the right to actually really complain about that situation? I mean, life is always going to be hard, and I hate to say there's always going to be someone who are worse off, but just be thankful for the things that you have in your life. What I'm doing with adventure thinking, which is something you touched on, is I'm currently interviewing a lot of different people actually out there. And one of the things I got from one of my guests, because everyone's got different lessons and stories, is just being grateful for what you have. And this can I tell a little story? Is that okay? About a friend of mine, Ryan, who actually he broke his back in 5 places in a plane crash, and he was in the spinal recovery ward, and he was trying to roll over. The doctors said he'd never walk again. He'd never, recover use of his legs. He was trying to roll over in bed, and that was his big task that he was trying to achieve, and he couldn't do it. It was said like he was twisting and turning, and it was too painful, it was too frustrating, and it just hurt too much, and he collapsed and stopped. He gave up. And he remembers looking down his arm, and there's a little gap in his arm, and he looked through that, and he saw another bloke who was in the room, who was a full quadriplegic, just staring and looking at him. And he said in his eyes, he could see the want, the desire, the frustration that he would never have that ability to even try and roll over. And Ryan sat with that, and it's a similar thing to what I just talked about. And it's just, you got to be grateful for what you do have. There is always a worse alternative, and just be thankful for the situation that you are in and what you have as your controllables.
Yeah. I think that's, certainly, whether you are in the middle of an ice cave or you are in the middle of a global pandemic going into a second wave, whatever it might be, that adversity, it is about, okay, what is in my circle of influence? What can I have a little bit of control over? Because it's so easy to catastrophize about all the things that could still go wrong, like that are going to be worse than you imagine. And that, like, it's human nature for us to go there when our brain goes into that fight and flight, and we start to freak out. But when we can bring it all back down and acknowledge that our brain will do that and come back into this circle of influence, what do I have some control of?
Yeah.
What's actually okay in my world right now?
I love the concept also of hormesis as well, about, a stress that would ordinarily at a high dosage, be harmful or kill you, but taking it as a low dose actually makes you stronger as a human being. And that could be, exercise is actually a form of that. Going to, hot saunaing, intermittent fasting, dieting, those things are all, when you stress your body, your body gains more capability. Stress isn't a bad thing. Stress is a fantastic thing. It's actually when you come back down from stress into rest that's where you have a tendency to fall apart and get sick. Stress, when you are stressed, it's a situation generally where you're actually going to grow as a human being. So when you come back, you got to watch out for. So I think you should lean into it, because just knowing each time you are getting stressed and you are in adversity, you are actually growing. And just knowing that, I think, helps with the hard times.
Yeah. Shani's asked a great question there. Do you think the more connected you are with people and the more stories that are shared to you, the more powerful you became out there?
It's an interesting word. The word, like, I'm finding I have a reaction to this in the sense that I don't feel that I'm powerful. I think sharing these stories, it's not about trying to reflect it on myself. It's trying to just help people on their own journeys. And so I suppose there's the power in that. But it's not about me. It's not about the yeah. I think if you asked me this 10 years ago, I probably would have given you a bit of a different response. There was a lot more ego wrapped up into me. But on the trips that I've gone on, I think there's been a lot of ego that's been stripped away, realizing how small and insignificant we are as individuals. But as a collective group, the ripple effect that we can have on those people around us is where the power is. So connection to people is what I crave and what I desire, and I want to promote. So that's a bit of a butchered answer to that question, Shani, but I hope you got something from that. Help me out, Heidi.
Definitely. No, and it's that whole connection piece, and I understand what you're saying with, even when we're younger, there is a lot of ego attached to many things. And, these two young guys going across the ditch and there's documentary made over you. And I don't even know you like my best friend or anything, but there's just this beautiful change that goes on as we go through years and we reflect, and we can see how things are different and what you extract from and what then you can teach. Because really, as you said, when you did that trip, it was never about that. You thought, I'm going to be standing on stages and extract the lessons and empower other people to maybe challenge themselves just a smidge in life.
Yeah,
just a smidge.
I think one of the biggest gifts you can give is you can create a population that's actually chasing passion a bit more, because a passionate set of people is a population that we need. A passionate population is a world that's going to be thinking about each other. It's going to be thinking about their goals. It's going to be thinking about better things, not negative things. And I just reread Shani's question a second again, and I see a part that I did miss there, and that's that. Yeah, there's a lot of conversations I am having with other adventurers and speakers and whatnot, and what I want to do is it does make, I suppose, the movement that I'm trying to create around the idea of adventure thinking more powerful, because as one person, you only have one angle at a problem and a solution or an issue. With other people actually out there, you get different takes on it. And I'm not the smartest guy out there, so I will happily sort of collaborate with other people and bring in their lessons and credit it back to them, obviously. But yeah, it's about sort of creating, I suppose, a set of tools for the collective humanity.
I love that. And that, so Shani has responded with that, what you're capable of to give in life. Yeah. Justin, I know that in March, your diary changed pretty dramatically, very quickly. Things were deleted immediately over a period of week for your entire 2020. Things you've had to adapt and be creative and do things differently. You've had to extract. Had to go into your toolkit in yourself, haven't you, with what you've learned from your adventures to be able to navigate out of this goddamn adventure that we're all on right now.
Yep.
So my question to you though is, you've got two young kids at home. You're trying to navigate this virtual speaking world and training and development through a screen. It's not easy. What are you doing for you that is helping you to keep your resilience strong? Because I know that you teach this, and all these things that are going on, despite how deep and good our toolkits are, they can chip away at our own resilience, right? And
100%, yeah.
And we need to be putting things in place. So what are you doing to keep your resilience strong?
Yeah, super question. And look, I am probably one of the worst people that, when I'm in the comfort of my home, I can fall back into pretty negative patterns. Not negative, I should say, but fairly static patterns where, and I might just tell this in a roundabout way. On an expedition, I have this mentality and this mindset where I am, and this is where adventure thinking stems from. I'm unstoppable. You can put any obstacle in front of me and I will find a way through it. Something happens to me back home. I spill a coffee over some papers. I'll have a big hissy fit. It'll be a big drama, palaver, rah. And the person that pulled me up on this was actually my wife, Lauren. She's like, what's going on? Like, if you're on an expedition, you just move on. You're emotionless about certain things. You crush it. You just find a solution. But here you're crying over coffee spilled on the table. Like, honestly, what's going on? And it made me realize that I switch in and out of what I call an expedition mindset, and so I've learned some triggers about how to kind of switch myself back in. And a lot of it is a bit of gameplay and role playing where you actually go, you know what, you put on a bit of a different persona, a different armor. And so you don't quite feel that if you take if something negative happens, that it's going to actually really hit you deep inside, because you're putting on a slight different variation of yourself. So it's going to just glance off you to a degree, because it's not truly yourself. You won't take it as personally. And I find that's quite powerful. But what am I doing for myself? I been stuck when it got really bad in Sydney for a couple of months. I live in Bondi Beach. All those backpackers that were having parties, and I mean, seriously, guys, you could hear them just going ballistic at them. Anyway, don't start me. What I realized was that I was forgetting a lot of these lessons and all these things that I know I need to do. And so for me, it was, it's consciously taking time out and doing some things for myself. And for me, it's generally in the water. So they close down the beaches, but I spearfish and I free dive. And that time in the water is forced presence. You have to be present to your situation. In the water, you've got to be looking around. You've got to be taking care. You can't be thinking about what's going to happen the next day or tomorrow or an hour's time. You're focusing on the now. And what that does is just brings you back to reality and forces you into the situation. When you come out of it, you realize how much you'd be thinking about different negative permutations about things that have gone wrong in the past, things that are going to go wrong in the future. And that just check is so, so powerful. So the meditation mindfulness piece that I get from diving is what was really helping me.
Yeah, I'm sure. It would be something very special to be, of course, not everyone around the world has access to Bondi Beach.
No, but
I mean, most people in Sydney have access to some form of water, and there is something beautiful about being in nature and the salt water and the sun shining. It changes everything.
It's actually, it's been scientifically proven that just access to nature is such a powerful thing that we need as humans. You will recover from stress so much faster if you go outside for a walk and see trees rather than sharp lines and angles. The color blue has actually been proven to actually help that happen as well. So exactly like meditation. Meditation forces you into the presence, forces you to think about your breath and brings you back to yourself. So really powerful. Also seeing the joy in small things. And realizing that, the negatives can be positive. So, by nature of what I do, when I'm at home a lot and I can be a present dad. But I've realized, that the little activities, like my daughter and I have just been baking up a storm since COVID has kind of hit us. And she's 4 years old. She can go off and make a set of scones by herself in the kitchen. I mean, honestly, all that I have to do basically is the oven. She can do that. It's so much fun. So seeing the joy in the small things, and that's what happens in the process of an adventure. You go through a survival stage, you go through an adaptation stage, and in the survival stage, you don't see the positives. You just focus on the negatives. You got to focus on the tigers that are going to jump out of the grass to try and get you. When you get past that, though, you start seeing, oh, you know what? On those trees, all those leaves where the tigers could be hiding behind, it actually looks really beautiful because there's these cobwebs that are there glistening in the sun, and you see the beauty in the situation, and you realize it's not that bad. And so it's trying to look for the beautiful moments. I think that's really important.
So last question for you.
Ooh, okay.
It is the Wine and Wisdom show. We've been having a little wine. You've been giving wisdom, but I do want to know, what has been the most impactful piece of wisdom that someone has handed down to you or said to you? What was it, and what impact did it make on your life that you have been able to then, shift things, change things, be a better person because of it? What has it been?
Oh, geez, that's tough. I think there's been so many people that have passed on tidbits. All I am is an amalgamation of my experiences, an amalgamation of bits of advice that people have given me. And one of the things that I think I've got there's so many jumping to mind. A couple of notable ones. An electrical engineer, a guy called Craig Thompson, who actually helped us on the Tasman journey. He said something that is almost a bit of a backhanded pay out in a weird way, but it's actually a really handy bit of advice. And he said, oh, look, you guys, when you're in this kayak, you'll get across. I don't know how long it's going to take to get across, but you'll get across. The one thing you have to be is you have to be disciplined. You have to be disciplined because, things are going to break, and you have to cut things off at the pass before they become a real issue. And if you do that, you guys, and he said, you guys are not the most fantastic, paddlers or anything out there. But if you take care of your systems and take care of your protocols, and you're disciplined in your actions, then that's then you'll get across. And I take that approach to a lot of things I do in my life. Whenever I'm feeling like, oh, I'll do it later, I see Craig in my mind is like, you've got to be disciplined. You've got to be disciplined. So we actually wrote that down in front of each of our cockpits, actually. And it's something that I do try and take into every day. A couple of other powerful pieces of advice that people have said to me along the way, and then I've later experienced. Sometimes I don't listen to advice. You have to experience the hurt first. One, I think, this is a really nice rephrasing of it's not failure, it's just gathering information. You never fail in life unless unless your actions cause critical death or something like that. Generally, what people call failure isn't really failure. It's just you're gathering information for the next time you try and do it. Yeah, and I think that's super. Now, another one that I am wholeheartedly jumping on the bandwagon of now more than ever, I can be a bit of a perfectionist. Is that perfection, it's not a standard, it's an obstacle. And we've got to drop this obsession with perfection because nothing's perfect. We're living in an imperfect world, and expecting perfection is just stupid. It's going to cause you so much frustration and heartache. And that's why I think people are struggling with what's happening now. It's an imperfect time, and we're imperfect people.
On a daily basis, I say the expression, perfection is a fairy tale.
Yes, yeah.
Because as I'm tweaking, trying to make something better, it's like, Heidi, just do it, get it out there. Perfection is a fairy tale.
I love it. Yeah. That's a great way to say it as well. I'm trying to teach my daughter at the moment that life's not fair. It's a little bit hard trying to teach a 4-year-old that.
Really, yeah. Justin, thank you so much for being here tonight, sharing your amazing expedition insights, your wisdom around how that all relates to, growth mindset really for times like these, adverse times, challenging times, uncertain times. We very much appreciate you being here, and I can't thank you enough.
Oh, look, it's been so much fun, and like I'm excited for when things come back from COVID, but they're not going to come back to the same normal. So I think we just got to expect a newer, heightened state of humanity after this. And it's going to be one that maybe we can't hug as much, but the intention to hug will be there a lot more.
It sure will. And if you would all like to find out more about the whole process of this adventure thinking and how you can come through uncertain times and change your mindset and build your resilience, if you go to adventurethinking.com, just .com, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
.com. Justin has lots of info there, and he's doing his whole live shows. So I'm sure you would love it, and I'm going to put that in the show notes. So thank you, everyone. Cheers to everybody. I'm going to cheers across the screen to. It's like weird when we have to do it that way. It doesn't really
it's so that way.
I hope you all had a wonderful Wednesday night. Thank you for being here. I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Justin. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much to everyone that's joined in. Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate it.